This podcast is intended for mature audiences, so grow up. Whatever. My name's Les, and I'm a storyteller. But these aren't just any stories. These are my stories, untold until now. A Gen Xer who's lived through it all. The analog days, the digital dawn, and everything in between. I'm sharing the true stories, the awkward moments, and the maybe you had to be there experiences that shaped who I am. From the suburban battlefields of being a childhood nobody to the existential angst of adulthood, each episode takes you on a journey through the events, the people, and the pop culture that defined my experience. This is Gen X Crossing, Episode 2, YRU Fat. This episode contains descriptions of some bullying and disordered eating. Listener discretion is advised. In 6th grade, when I was 11, my sister informed me that I was fat. This was a Sunday after church, and we were taking my grandmother to Wyatt's cafeteria before running her home. My sister and I were arguing in the back seat about something, as kids do, and she responded to whatever I said with, "Well, you're fat." That cut me to the quick, and the argument ended. I stared quietly out the window as we pulled into the parking lot. As we worked our way through the food line, I decided to just have some green beans. My mother, irritated with my choice, asked, "Is this because Amanda said you were fat?" I hadn't realized we'd been overheard. I declared that it wasn't, that I just wasn't hungry. I knew my sister didn't mean it, and I was afraid to get her in trouble. Besides, she was right. I had always felt self-conscious about my size, and now, as a preteen, I was starting to get a little bigger. Puberty hadn't hit yet, but my lower half was starting to fill in. It wasn't curves. I felt like God had slapped clay on my belly, thighs, and calves, but never smoothed it out. I felt clunky, chunky. I decided it was time to go on a diet. My mom had been trying some form of dieting for as long as I could remember. Diet Cola, AIDS candies.
With AIDS, I ate less, so the weight came off.
Yes, they were called AIDS, AIDS. They were appetite-suppressant caramels that she kept high up in a cabinet to keep us from eating them. By the way, they were delicious, so that didn't work. She also had this huge salad she would make all the time with green beans and iceberg lettuce with tuna on top, so dieting didn't sound all that bad. That following Monday, I had one piece of toast with a little bit of margarine, then packed only carrots and celery for my lunch. Since my mom was still in bed the mornings when I left for school, she wouldn't see what I was packing and wouldn't harangue my sister for giving me a complex. I did fairly well the first few hours of the school day, but by 11:30, when lunchtime rolled around, I was feeling ravenous and a little shaky. I was so mad at myself for being hungry. I sat down at the lunch table with a couple of classmates and started eating my celery first. I liked the carrots way better. A few boys took notice of what I was eating, and one of them said, "What, are you on a diet or something?" I didn't answer. Sarah, my sweet and very skinny friend, took notice and said, "You can't be on a diet." The loudmouth of the group, Peter, spoke up and said, "It wouldn't hurt her to lose some weight." The other boys laughed. Sarah told them firmly to shut up and mind their own business. They turned away and engrossed themselves in football conversation or something, leaving us to talk. She said to me, "Even if you did need to lose weight and you don't, everybody is different. You're too young to be dieting. You have to feed your body. You're still growing." Then she popped the lid on her rectangular bright orange Tupperware dish, ate half of her spaghetti, and gave the rest to me, insisting that I eat it. She had plenty of food, she said, and pulled out an apple, a cold piece of garlic bread, and a can of banana pudding as proof. I was simultaneously relieved and ashamed. I wanted to cry, but the spaghetti tasted so good. I could feel the shakes dissipating. "Bring your lunch tomorrow," she said, swatting my shoulder as we walked out of the cafeteria toward the playground. Your whole lunch. I had never been parented by a peer, and never parented so well in general around food. You have to eat was permission to feed my body. I quit my diet that same day. Fast forward to fall, 7th grade. My dad had been gone for several months. He walked out on our family to live with his new girlfriend. Not surprisingly, when he took off, he refused to pitch in at all for us kids or for the house. Scarcity is an interesting thing. For all my life up till then, we lived with a scarcity mindset. There was always a feeling that there was not enough or that it might go away. But actual scarcity was that fear come to life, a whole other level. I was constantly worried about money and how to help my mother stretch her money, but I could not stop overeating. Eating was my escape, a haven from the terror of our situation and my growing fear of our mother. She was easily angered, undergoing drastic weight loss from the stress of the situation. Meanwhile, my weight began to skyrocket. My mother had found a great way to save on our grocery bill. Introducing generics.
Generics, a new no-frills value choice.
Our cupboards and fridge were full again, with pastas, soups, crackers, pizza, frozen vegetables, burritos, ice cream, chips, cookies, cereal. It seemed everything in our kitchen that came in a box, a bag, or a can was in white packaging, plainly labeled with a black, bold font. No more trick cereal or even off-brand Doritos from King Soopers. In its place were fruit-flavored rings and taco-flavored corn chips. The pitch about generics was that the products were exactly the same as name brands like General Mills, Kraft, or Frito-Lay, but that without the fancy packaging or catchy names, companies were free to sell their products for less.
They're as wholesome as the name brands, and they taste good, too.
This was mostly a lie. Powdered milk, which my mom had taken to adding to liquid milk to make it stretch farther, was bad enough when it was the Topco brand. Generic powdered milk wasn't even milk adjacent. The cheese pizza looked like pizza but oddly had no smell when it was baked.
That's not even... Okay.
Generics in general had an air of unrealness about them. I realized that this might sound like mostly junk food, but there was a lot of overwhelm in our lives at the time. My mother was a wonderful cook, but since we were older and our schedules busier, we were left to prepare our own meals and fend for ourselves. Mom tried to make it easier for us with convenience foods. Another way that my mother made it easier on us, on herself, on her budget, was to apply for my sister and I to get free school lunch at Wheatrist Junior High. When she told us this, I reminded her of a joke my dad used to make, how they looked poor when they went out to eat at a nice restaurant. They didn't do that often with 5 kids. He would say, "We weren't dressed up enough. They asked us if we were on the federal lunch program," and then laugh at his own joke. Well, now we were on the federal lunch program, my sister and I, thanks to Dad, and it wasn't funny. I would have called and told him if he'd left a forwarding number, but I don't think he would see the humor in it either, since he was the reason. Each Monday morning, we had to go to the cafeteria when it first opened at 7:30 and ask for our meal tickets, which included breakfast, too. Other kids were lined up to buy theirs, but they didn't get breakfast, so we freeloaders were easy to pick out and pick on. Needing free lunch exposed us as vulnerable, which made us targets of teasing. I found myself wishing that the other students with free meal tickets would talk to me, that we could bond over our common circumstances. But they would just sit alone and stare ahead. The lunch ladies were curt and dismissive when you had free tickets.
What's for your wants, your none.
They must think my dad walked out on us, I thought in shame. I had always felt bad for kids where the dad was gone. But this was us now, and I felt somehow responsible, like I had to account for it to the lunch ladies, like it was my embarrassment. I desperately wanted to explain to them that our dad moved out without telling us where he was going, that my sisters had taken part-time jobs to help out, that we were buying generics and doing the best we could. I don't think it would have mattered even if I had told them. Mean is mean. So I just shut up and accepted my free food. I ate everything on my tray, every time, and all the generics at home I could stuff in my face, even though none of it tasted good. I just ate and ate and ate. One day, my mother took me for a haircut, right before we were supposed to get school pictures. To save money, we went to the beauty college, but the student stylist accidentally cut my hair way too short. I was mortified when the pictures came back and all I could see was my fat face and my big fat arm taking up the shot. Then, that same week, walking home from school with my friend Kit, these two guys, Brett and Mark, taunted us, continuously calling us fatties and saying that we were ugly. We ignored them as long as we could, and then I spun around and said, "How rude," as Kit and I linked arms and marched away. I don't know where that came from. I was a pretty quiet kid, but I'd had enough. I just wanted them to shut up. It felt good, and it must have worked, because they continued to walk quietly behind us. I stopped at the light on 38th and Kendall, and Kit continued to her house on Harlan Street. "Hey," Brett said, Mark standing quietly next to him as we waited for the walk light. "You aren't as fat as she is," he said, nodding to his right. "Thanks," I said, but I knew what they really thought. Eighth grade. Things started to even out a little. My dad's girlfriend dumped him, so he was back home, to his marriage and to his obligations. We were no longer eligible for lunch tickets, and so it was back to sack lunches, white bread bologna sandwiches, potato chips, a pickle, and a zinger. In case you don't know what a zinger is, picture a Twinkie with a raspberry-flavored jelly on it, rolled generously in coconut. Oh, they were so good. I was supposed to eat one a day in my lunch, but I always sneaked in another one before dinner when I got home. "You kids go through goodies like they're going out of style," my dad would complain. He kept bear claw pastries on top of the fridge that were only for him, but sometimes I would get a chair and reach up there, peel back the plastic wrap, and scrape off the icing that was stuck on the plastic wrap, which usually had a little of the pastry with it, then carefully place it back. He never said anything, so I don't know if he actually noticed. My summer break that year consisted of watching TV and snacking, pretty much all day, every day. When fall came, I had gone up 2 pant sizes. Oh well, I thought, everyone gains weight when they first become a teenager. When I got to school the first day, though, I wanted to hide in my locker. Over summer break, between 7th and 8th grades, a classmate of mine had lost a lot of weight. Everyone was in awe when she walked in the doors. "Julie, is that you? You look great, so skinny," everyone seemed to be saying everywhere she went. I was extremely jealous, honestly. How had she done that? I worked up the courage to ask her once all the hullabaloo died down. We were changing out our books at our lockers. "Hey, you look so good," I said nervously. She seemed annoyed to be hearing it for the 1,000th time and glanced over with a slight smile of acknowledgement. There had been a change besides her size. The once jokey, silly pal to everyone had become serious, confident, excluding. She did answer my question, and I realized suddenly that we were no longer going to be friends. She recited a dismissive and stock answer. "I went to a doctor who put me on a diet, and I started exercising. All summer I went swimming, and the weight just came off," she said, closing her locker and walking away. "Oh," I said to her back, feeling embarrassed somehow that my attention was so irritating, but the attention of others was welcomed, interacted with. She had upgraded her friend group. wasn't the only overweight person in my school. There were a few other girls that were struggling, at varying levels from 20 pounds overweight to obese. I wasn't super close with them, but I sure didn't judge them. I knew that there were good reasons, even knowing them peripherally, why they were overweight. No one wanted to be fat. At lunchtimes, if you had a note from your parents, you were allowed to go off campus. Julie and her boyfriend Todd walked to the Burger King on the corner of 38th and Wadsworth on Fridays. I had semi-stalked her now for a few weeks, observing what she packed for lunch, noticing that she was no longer snacking between classes on candy and junk. She was calm. My friend Marie and I stayed at a distance behind as they strolled slowly, each one having a hand in the pocket of the other's jeans, hers now hanging on her slender frame. That person, the person she had become, seemed impossible for me to attain. Subdued, confident, a flat stomach and clothes that didn't strain to fit. But there must have been more to it. I couldn't get my mind around eating less. What did eating less mean when you have to eat to live? I realized now I was overthinking it, but I had never not just eaten what I wanted and how much I wanted, except for the half day I tried dieting in 6th grade. I stood behind her as she ordered at Burger King. I wondered how someone who had lost all that weight was allowed to eat hamburgers. If she could do that, why couldn't I? She got a hamburger, no cheese, small fries, and a small soda. Marie and I sat one booth away, me being sure to sneak glances to see if there was something special about the way she ate. Did she put something in her food? I looked at what I had ordered, almost completely gone. A Whopper with cheese and a large fry, and a Diet Coke, of course. And I was worried that I would still be hungry. I could never do that, I thought to myself. I'd starve. The following early summer, I had a visit with the young doctor who had just joined our family's practice. My green knit shorts with yellow piping were snug, riding up on me. Still, I tucked in my sleeveless green t-shirt and pulled up my green striped tube socks so that I looked decent for the doctor's office. My Nikes I had gotten for Christmas 6 months before were the only thing I didn't have to stuff myself into. I felt disgusted with my shape. Blob. I had not only failed to lose weight after seeing Julie's success, I had gained even more. My aunt said she thought it was normal. My mother, however, was concerned. Her other 2 daughters had not gained any weight when they were my age, and now my sister, closest in age to me, had started putting on some extra weight too. Still, she wasn't nearly as fat as I was. When the nurse told me to step on the scale, I hit a new low. She announced loudly as she jotted it on my chart that I weighed 165 pounds. I wanted to crawl under the exam table, to disappear. The doctor did not examine me. He didn't take my blood pressure or look into my throat. No say ah. No questions. He just called me into his office next to the exam room and told me to sit down. "You are overweight." "Gee, thanks, Doc." "There's nothing wrong with you. You just need to eat less. You have to burn more calories than you take in, Leslie." This was vague and completely not helpful advice. I felt like he was disgusted by my appearance, like he just didn't like me. "Okay, thank you." My voice was a bit shaky as I swallowed my tears. I was never going to burn more calories than I took in. I was scared to death of going hungry. I was eating nonstop in my basement bedroom, whatever I could until I was stuffed, laying on my bed and watching an old black and white TV my grandmother had given me. It was my cave, my hideaway from a really shitty existence. My grades were poor. My parents were fighting all the time. I didn't know it then, but I was depressed. I would pack regular lunches, but then come home and eat whole meals before dinner, then eat dinner, then eat after dinner. I couldn't stop. My sisters could stop. My brother was an eating machine, but he was naturally lean and muscular. I just didn't have that full thing. I understood stuffed. I could stop when I was stuffed or ashamed. This was before stress eating was even a thing, and for some reason, kids being stressed in the 80s was laughable. Like, what do you have to be stressed about? What's your problem, fatty? Then, something happened. One day, while I was homesick, or sad, from school, I camped out in front of our TV upstairs. Everyone was gone, so I knew I could lay around and eat in peace while watching color TV all by my lonesome. The Price is Right was just ending, so I microwaved a burrito and curled up in a blanket on our black vinyl recliner to see what was next. It was a show I'd never seen before. The Richard Simmons Show. The opening was tone-setting music under a voiceover of Richard Simmons introducing the topic of the day. Then there would be clips of the show while some upbeat music played. People exercising, Richard in costume, celebrity interviews. The opener ended with Richard pulling up in his Mercedes and clicking his heels in a leprechaun jump while the camera zoomed in on his vanity plate. YRU Fat. Those words made me really sad, but I really liked the show. He did funny skits and a cooking segment. Then there was the exercise, which looked fun and easy to do. At the end, the lights would dim as he sat on the edge of the stage and gave an inspiring message. Richard himself had been overweight as a very young man, and he was realistic, honest, sweet. The show had initially aired late mornings during the week, but it became so popular that episodes were replayed later in the day, so it became my after-school entertainment. I could be found most days in my dark basement hideaway with my best buddies, zingers, Hostess fruit pies, chips, or all three, watching Richard Simmons from my bed, hanging on his every word. One day, he was wrapping up an interview with a married couple who had lost 100 pounds. He stood between them, arms over their shoulders, as the camera zoomed in on just him. He stared right at me, pleaded with me to start liking myself and stop looking at food to make me feel better, to bring me happiness. I looked down at my lap and started to cry, my mouth full of something. As the credits rolled over the footage of his studio audience jogging in place, I spit out whatever it was and just sobbed. It was the first good cry I'd had in more than a year. The next day, instead of getting food when I got home from school, I went straight to the basement and put on some comfortable clothes and waited for the Richard Simmons show to start. Something had clicked in my head. I understood what he was saying, that everything counted, calories and exercise alike. A light went on when he said during his cooking segment that if you continually taste your food as you cook, you could be eating an extra 500 calories more than you think you're eating. He gave me a new awareness, talked about lower fat options and how to add more protein and whole grains into your diet. There were the occasional commercials for his products between segments, but I was just a teenager and wasn't old enough to work, so ordering anything was out of the question. I didn't have to, though. All I needed to do was move my body and eat more healthy foods. My family had heard enough of my complaining and self-deprecating comments about my weight, so I decided to do this quietly, on my own. In the back of my mind, though, was a promise my sister had made to me months before, that if I lost 20 pounds, she'd take me to the Lakeside Mall and buy me a new pair of overalls at the Gap. With those overalls in my sights, I began following along with the studio audience during Richard's exercise segment. I started getting a little sense of accomplishment by being able to keep up. I also started to be able to make it to dinner without a whole other meal in between. If I was really hungry, I would have cottage cheese or a piece of fruit. I told myself potato chips were not an option, and if I was that hungry, I could have a carrot. Somehow, that worked. Soon, I had developed a new routine, one that included a challenge to myself to continually eat less food. Sometimes way less. Then, after Richard Simmons' show was over each day, I continued to exercise in the basement to my favorite Amy Grant album, mostly running in place using my sister's old ankle weights. My parents' bedroom was in the basement too, which was where the stereo was, so eventually my mother noticed that I was exercising. She said she was proud of me for taking care of myself. I really didn't have a place to put that, so I thanked her and continued my push. Every day, I would eat as little as possible and take random vitamins of my mother's that I found in the cabinet. My logic was, as long as I was getting the nutrients I needed from them, I could get away with not eating. I hated the scale, so I wouldn't weigh myself. But eventually, my pants were so baggy that I couldn't wear them anymore, and I decided to see how much I weighed. I was 135 pounds, a 30-pound loss in about 6 months. I set a new goal of 125 and continued my regimen. If I got a craving, I would secretly get whatever it was, chew it up, and then spit it in the trash when no one was looking. My self-talk was drill instructor-like. I remember taunting myself. Go ahead, eat what you want, be a cow, no one cares. My dad was very happy with me and referred to me as my beautiful, skinny daughter for the first time in my life. We would take mile walks together after my workouts. I had one-on-one attention from him. I would talk about my goal for another 10 pounds, which he was thrilled with, but he cautioned me. The important thing is to keep it off, he would say. It's a lot easier to put it on than it is to take it off. Yeah, totally, I would say, shoving down the nagging feeling of conditional acceptance that always seemed to come from my dad's words of encouragement. My sister, making good on her promise, bought me the overalls, a size 8, much smaller than the size 14 Kmart jeans I had been wearing. Make sure you keep it off so these'll fit you, she said as she handed me the bag. She had never dieted in her life and ate whatever she wanted. My dad too, actually. Again, I shoved my feelings in and funneled them into my rituals. I had developed some rituals and some obsessions around how I ate and how much I exercised. I always tried to leave one piece of food on my plate. I figured that meal by meal that would really add up. I started getting shin splints and painfully sore ankles from running in place. My food cravings took on lustful proportions, which found me imagining enormous bowls of spaghetti that I would reward myself with after school and my workout if I could go without food. Then I would deny myself the reward and work out longer for wanting to eat. But I kept watching Richard Simmons, kept learning, kept getting support, almost to the end of high school. When his show went off the air in 1984, the beginning of my senior year, I gained back about 20 pounds. It wasn't so much that the show was gone, though that didn't help. It was the stressors around me. I defaulted back to that old familiar comfort, hiding out and watching TV while I binged. And then I would come out of the basement, eat better, move more, and slim down again. Ahead of me, there would, of course, be many, many ups and downs with my weight, and years of unraveling the complicated relationship between me and food. Richard Simmons was there, then and in those subsequent years, in a way that I desperately needed. During a very stressful period in my 20s, I bought one of his VHS tapes and worked out in my living room. I used his food mover to help me know what proportions to choose and to ensure that I ate a variety of foods. When I finally got professional help in my 30s, the nutritionist was very encouraging about the habits I had formed through following Richard Simmons. It was what amounted to a few tweaks and changes in perspective that provided for me the habits that I follow to this day. I watched Richard Simmons be made fun of, mocked for years and years, until one really ugly comment from a reporter seemed to send him out of the public eye completely. He wasn't perfect. He had his own battles with food and weight even then. But I am so glad he lived the remainder of his life out of the limelight, and I truly hope he was happy in the last several years of his life. I hope he never lost his light, never forgot how loved and appreciated he was. He gave me the guts to ask without shame and then answer the question for myself at more than one watershed moment in my life. Why am I fat? So that's the skinny on that. There are many, many more stories to come. Some are sad, some might crack you up. All of them really happened. If you want to hear more, please like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Les with Gen X Crossing. Peace out.